Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni mili wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Tell your kids' teachers, their principal, their librarian, and also please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your podcast. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Mr. Thoughtful Gets Into Trouble. Great new children's book from Christopher Arsenault. Join Mr. Thoughtful on an exhilarating voyage through the wondrous world of thoughts and emotions. Discover the magic of kindness and positivity as Mr. Thoughtful embarks on an adventure that not only sparks creativity, but also nurtures children's self-esteem, leaving young minds inspired and empowered. You are going to love meeting Mr. Thoughtful. He is your friendly guide through the world of thoughts and kindness. And you and your kids will both love joining in his adventure and discovering the power of positive thinking and the joy of choosing kindness over chaos. We love this book. You'll love it too. It's Mr. Thoughtful Gets Into Trouble by Christopher Arsenault. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Moon from Dehradun, a story of partition written by Shireen Shamsi. This is a really, really powerful book inspired by the author's family story. This lyrical, moving picture book is a testament to the strength, courage, and perseverance of the over 15 million refugees displaced by the largest forced migration in recorded history. And it shares a young girl's journey from her old home to her new one. This is a really, really powerful story that will inspire lots of fantastic conversations in your home. It belongs in your family library. It belongs in every classroom library. Get your copy today. The Moon from Dehradun, a story of partition by Shireen Shamsi. Join us right now from the beautiful city of Chicago. Our guest is returning to the show to celebrate her brand new book. It's called Can You? Please welcome back Dr. Rekha Rajan. Hey,
Hello.
Dr. Rekha, how are you?
Thank you for having me again. I'm doing great. Super excited to talk to you about my picture book debut, actually. I've published several other books for children, but this is my very first picture book, and it's super fun. And yes, can you dance like a peacock?
That is beautiful. I love that. And unless a peacock is a very stiff animal, I have to say that I can't dance like a peacock right now.
You know, the idea for this book, we were chatting briefly about my 3 years of living in California and quickly returning back to Chicago. But the idea for the book came during COVID, actually, because my children were younger then. They were probably, let's say, 5, 7, and 9 at the time. And there was no education. We were all parents stuck at home. Schools were struggling with what to do, maybe an hour or two of Zoom, and then they'd say, go outside and enjoy the nice weather. And it was just a lot. And I was working on other projects and other things, but I realized my kids we weren't going outside because of wildfires, and we weren't getting physical activity, and they weren't reading. And so amidst playing various games, we would act like different animals as one game, for example. And they really loved it. And because of my arts background, my music and theater and dance background, I made it into this kind of musical activity. So, hey, we're going to move around like peacocks, but what do they actually do? How can we show that physically? And that's where the idea for the story came from. And I thought, you know what, if my kids are really enjoying this, it could become a really fun and engaging read aloud for children and families, because the other piece is when we want to read aloud, and I spoke to you last time about the Read Aloud Factor, the book that had all the brain research in there. And reading should not just be this one-way experience, right? And the more you read aloud, the healthier your brain is. And so I wanted this to be an engaging read aloud. So there are prompts in every section of the book. So after you learn about why peacocks dance and how they move, and in fact, a lot of people have actually written to me and said they didn't realize the males were the only ones that have all those beautiful feathers. But there's a dance break. So I'm blocking myself. So kiddos get up and move and actually dance. So I've done several live presentations of this book, a couple of big festivals in Chicago, school events, bookstore events, and it's so fun because all the adults get up and move. I did the Printers Row Lit Fest last month in the South Loop of Chicago. There were hundreds and hundreds of booksellers and authors. And there was a policeman that joined in from the street, parents, their children, I loved that kind of reciprocal relationship taps back into my experience of being a performer on stage, but it came out of a book. Yeah. So there's all the background of the story.
Well, I love that. And I love that. And I have very vivid, beautiful, wonderful memories of my kids and me getting involved in books like that. A book like, hey, can you do this? Can you dance like this? Can you wiggle your nose like that? And I mean, it's been decades since my kids were young enough to cuddle up on my lap and have me read to them. They're both bigger than me right now. But
it goes quickly.
It's just such a wonderful thing, and it really helps kids fall in love with reading. It helps kids fall in love with us. And us falling in love with our kids. And so I'm super happy that you've created Can You Dance Like a Peacock? And I love also the STEM kind of connection with it, in that we're starting to, we learn that it's only peacocks who have those beautiful feathers, and only male peacocks that have those beautiful feathers, and learning other facts about different animals and insects through your book.
Yeah, it's a very STEM focused book, which goes back to my early childhood background and teaching young children. There's so many different animals in here. I mean, I could have written 100, but it is a picture book. So there's gazelles, and I did a lot of research, of course, because it is a nonfiction book, even though it's very lyrical and fun and playful. And I didn't know that the word for what they do is called stotting, S-T-O-T. So it was fun to research and find out things myself. The bees that do the waggle dance, it's actually a scientific term, and they use that. Well, I'm sure there's a more scientific term, but it's actually called the waggle dance, as they move to tell other bees where to get honey. Super fun with the kiddos putting their hands on their hips and waggling and wiggling around the room. And dolphins, of course. Mm-hmm. So the playfulness is they're not really dancing, right? It's not a choreographed dance, but their movements are natural, and they use these movements. All of these different animals and insects and creatures use these movements to communicate. So, for example, the dung beetle, one of my favorites, does a 365 dance on his dinner, which is poop. And he's telling the other dung beetles, don't touch mine. This is my poop that I'm going to eat. The Spanish dancer Sea Slug, and I have to do a shout out to Hannah Abo, who's the illustrator. She did such a great job with this. You can see the Spanish dancer is dancing and moves to hide away if it's in danger, but her art depicts all of these beautiful colors in the ocean, but then a little playfulness if you don't really see that that's the predator coming. And then flamingos. I ended with this. So there's really an arc to the story. There's all these different creatures, but then the dance prompt for flamingos is find a partner. So probably a parent and child, or two siblings or whatever. Find your partner and march, march, march together. And then a little recap of all of the creatures, but then really helping children understand that the best dance moves are inside of you. And I always bring along instruments, and then I play instruments, and everybody gets up and does their own kind of free form dance. And then at the end of the book, there's a lot of nonfiction facts about each of the dances. So to take that STEM piece a little further. And then I created activities for teachers and parents to do with the book. So a little academic extension.
What a wonderful, wonderful book, and what a wonderful service for teachers and for families. You know, just because something's labeled for teachers doesn't parents, you have to remember that you are your child's first and most important teacher.
Absolutely.
So if you see something for teachers, go right in there because that's for you too.
Yes.
I love this because, you know, we talk about, and I hear from parents all the time, like, oh, my kid wants me to read this book 500 times. And yeah, if you read it the same way 500 times, that's a drag, but there's no need to read a book the same way, especially a book like Can You Dance Like a Peacock? I mean, you can read it as a story, you can go through it and then just take one each. I mean, the whole thing about, you know, bees and how they dance to communicate, like, where to go. We're here in Chicago on the south side, and if you follow my butt and how I'm wiggling, you go 3 blocks north, turn right, and then there's where the honey is or the pollen.
That's exactly what it is. They actually create a path with their wiggling and waggling for others to follow. It's really incredible. Yeah, and that STEM education piece, again, the idea came out of COVID and being even more of having to be a teacher for my children because, you know, everybody was struggling, and having that extension of different activities you could do. And, you know, there's a graphing thing in there. There is art activities in there. There's so much you could do, not even with this book, but with all the books you read aloud. To create those extensions, I think is so important.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's just, you know, it's one thing for a kid to sit in a classroom, even if you have the most engaging teacher in the world. They're not going to really fall in love with the subject or fall in love with learning as much as they will if they sit down and they fall in love with learning and reading in your lap. Coming home and it's like, I've been at school, and well, let's come home and do something fun. And, you know, we can learn while we're having fun, and this is such a neat way to do it.
Yeah, again, it goes back to that research on reading aloud, how important it is for your child's brain, the social emotional piece, building a bond, and just helping. Some of the reviews, the wonderful reviews that have come in, have noted exactly what you said, that it's a way to get kids up and moving and engaged with reading. And so they're not just sitting there and listening to the same story told over and over again. Yes, that's important. That piece is important to reading aloud, but there's an engagement here. They're actually involved with the story, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah. So I have to take a minute. You know, we talked a little bit about it the last time you were here, but it's been a while. You are an author, you're a musician, you're an educator. I mean, you're a parent most of all, but where do you find time?
People ask me that all the time. You know, it's like this idea honestly came out of nowhere when just interacted with my kids, and I jotted it down, and you have to make time for it. You just have to make time for everything. Having them in school all day helps. So it was a lot less effective for me to try and build up a writing career when every 30 minutes somebody was hungry. So it's nice that they're in a routine. I can get into a writing routine. But what I've really tried to do is, you know, the first 20 years of my career was performing. It was performing on stage or across the country, operas, musicals. And I don't necessarily get to do that as much anymore. It's probably been 10 years since I was on a stage. And I just really always have been a creative person and wanted to find a way to continue to have creative outlets. And so this helps me with that. Most of my books have some art component or music component in there. I have a board book series. I know we're not talking about that today, but
that's fine.
It's called This Is Music. And there's 4 books, and each one is an introduction to musical instruments for children. And there's an instrument in the book. So with everything that I write, I try and bring that music education piece into it. Definitely get the most done when they're in school, though.
Yeah. You know, I love that. I think one thing that, you know, people who read your books, visit your website, I'm one thing that I hope that they're getting is that we don't need to be, a lot of times we slap a label on ourselves. I'm a teacher. I'm an engineer. I write software. I do this. But those labels limit us. And you are somebody who you have a bunch of labels.
I do.
And it's like the more labels you have, the more you do, because it's just reminding yourself that I don't need to be pigeonholed into this one spot. And I think that's a great lesson for everyone, but I think it's especially a great lesson for us to be able to share with our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we all have certain passions and things that we love. We have things that we're good at, things we gravitate to. But I really, in my work as an early childhood educator, it's important that children have opportunity and access to try different things. How would you ever know if you're going to be the next great piano player if you don't even have access to a piano? So one of the things for me that I've always advocated for is that piece of access and equity. One of the things is to do that through books. That's a way for children to learn about different careers, different pathways, see themselves in stories. I talk a lot at school visits about the fact that I've always loved writing. I've always had a diary. My mom found this book. It's like a blank book that I created poems and all this stuff in there, limericks, all these great things that my fifth grade teacher gave to all of us and said, do whatever you want with this. She saved it, and 30 years later, gave it to me. And so I realized I always loved writing, but I never thought I could have author as a profession until I was probably in my early 30s when I started dabbling into maybe I want to do this now because I'm not going to have the creative outlet of being on stage. So yeah, I have that. I have, author, singer, dancer, parent, wife.
Yeah.
Mother of multiple animals that are roaming around in the house. But yeah, it's important for children to be able to see that. My youngest really wants to play in the NFL, and I'm, want to support him. I'm not thrilled about that. It's such a, scary sport to me as a parent. But then he's also like, but I also love math and I also love mixing things. So I said, yes, explore what you want to do and see. But I think for children that may not have access to a piano or to be able to take, sports classes or whatever, seeing themselves and seeing those ideas in books is what I think is the most important thing.
I think that's a huge point because we don't understand that not every kid has the opportunity to know somebody who is most kids don't get a chance to meet somebody who's a professional magician or a musician or magician in my case.
Yes, exactly.
I know for me growing up, when I told my family that I was going to leave human services and be a performer, they're like, no one does that for a living. That's insane. Right. That's crazy. And I think the same is true. If a kid has nobody in their circle that's a scientist or a researcher, right, then it's like, well, how do I get into that? And, the first way is just books and talking about it and having us sitting down, reading those books saying, you can do that too.
Yeah. I mean, that's a similar kind of reaction I got from my family. My family's from South India, and the stereotype of what Indians do is real. I think almost every single one of my cousins is an MD. My brother's a surgeon. My dad was an engineer before he retired. My mom's a teacher. So it's a very targeted path. And so when I said, I want to be an opera singer, it was kind of like, what? Who does that? So thankfully it was, I was supported by them, and I had that pathway to be able to perform and do that. I also then fell in love with education and did end up teaching music. And then did end up getting my doctorate. So, I can't write you a prescription, but I can sing to you. I can sing you to sleep. But I was able to follow that pathway. And I think, honestly, if I didn't have that music career and that opportunity to perform, I don't know that it would have led me into the creative path of being able to write books like this or study, the impact of the arts on children's development. I was able to do that because I came from that world of the arts and had that knowledge. So absolutely, if you don't have the modeling or the access or the support, it's very difficult. And I read so many books about, people that were, had singing careers, or this person's a singer. It was inspiring for me to want to do that. And so I think if, you don't have access to certain things, books are and should be an entry point for all children.
Yeah. Tell me, let's take advantage of you being a doctor, that there's a doctor in the house. Talk a little bit about the benefits that kids, we talk a lot about the benefits of reading, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but about just talk a moment about the benefits of encourage our kids to check out the arts. You know, a kid playing piano, playing drums, they're not wasting their time. There's some real benefits beyond just learning how to play a piano.
Yeah, so there's a lot here. One of the things people come to me and say is like, why is music so important for early childhood? And the thing I always start with is think about how we teach young children the alphabet. We teach it through music. We teach it through song. There's a reason for that. There are connections through the arts and through music with the things we naturally learn. Yes, there's research on music and math and how the skills that you gain when you learn an instrument and how it connects to certain parts of the brain. I'm actually doing a TEDx talk at the end of this month with our library and the big topic is creativity. But this is what I'm actually going to be speaking about. When we think about traits of a creative person, right? We think of things like able to take risks, see things in new ways, be open-minded. And in my research, what I've actually found is those same traits, looking at things in new ways, taking risks, being open-minded, are actually also the developmental traits of a 4-year-old. So we are naturally born creative. Something changes. Is it the school system? Is it our environment? That when we get older, we think, hey, I'm not really a creative person anymore. But that is one of the most important things that people look at in work. There was CEOs of the top 400 or Fortune 400, 500 companies, whatever that was. They were interviewed and they all said the number one trait they look for when they're hiring somebody is creativity. So if we know that that's important and we know that we are actually born with these skills, what can we do to support and build creativity in our children? And there's only one subject area that really does that. Yeah. And that's the arts.
Yeah. So,
yes.
So valuable in any kind of job situation. If you're able to sit down and look at a problem and suggest a solution to that problem, that's kind of like sitting down and writing an opera or writing a book, or, it's that you're tapping into that creativity, and that's a beautiful thing.
And it's incredible to me. People that I meet that are, CEOs of companies or surgeons or whatever, my brother was in gifted math when he was in elementary school. He has nothing to do with his career now, but there is, somebody's playing an instrument for 10 years and they don't talk about it, but they reflect on that and the impact it had on them. And then they're like, I want to start a piano again. So it's an important part of childhood. It's just like playing sports and the physical activity. The arts really support creative development and creative thinking. And so while you might think, we're doing a little art project in preschool, we're done. It's not that simple. It's building those skills and the ability to think creatively. Again, like you said, if you're a surgeon, you want to be able to think creatively. If you're a teacher, I always say your classroom is your stage. Mm-hmm. You need to be flexible, ready to pivot, ready to move. So those skills that the arts teach are so important for us later in life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love sitting down and talking with you because we get into so many different areas and there's so much more about you. People can find out more by visiting your website. Where should they go to find that?
Yes, everything is very simple. RekhaSRajan.com. My Instagram and social media handles are the same, Rekha S. Rajan. Just tried to keep it same as my name. So, and there's always updates on there, new projects coming out, many that I'm very, very excited about, especially coming out next year, a new chapter book series, and just other events that I'm doing. I have a lot coming up over the next couple of months to promote the books, but it's really nice, especially with books like this, to see the audience and the readers and the families get up and do the prompts and do it together. It's that, and you're a performer too, so you know this. There's such a reciprocal relationship we have with the audience when we perform. And you can't be a performer without it. We feed off of the audience. And with that, I really want reading to be like that for children. I want them to feel a part of the experience and not just that they're being read to, which is important, but that they have some engagement with the story. So there's tips on my website, things, for teachers and parents. So please go visit.
Yeah. I was thinking, this is just one of those things that just came to my mind as you were talking about the arts, and you mentioned your son wanted to be in the NFL, and it's like every high school has a football stadium and a football program, and we love it. And as I heard in the video this morning, it benefits one company, the NFL. And it's really dangerous for a lot of kids. But the first programs to get cut are the arts programs and all these other things. And
always,
if we could just, and I think one of the reasons we are so supportive of football and sports is because it's interactive. When we're in the stands, we feel like we can make a difference and we can change the outcome by the way that we're rooting everybody on.
You're right.
And so let's just understand we can do the same thing. We can have when we're supporting our kids in the arts and in STEM and mathematics and science, we're participating. We're not screaming our heads off, but our support adds to the performance. And there's a little piece of us every time our kids get up on that dance stage for their recital and they fall over because the kids in front of them fell over. But we're part of that, and it's beautiful. And so let's just remember that so that we're out there and we're supporting the arts and STEM and all those other great things.
Yeah, and we have to remember as parents, as community leaders, the role that we give to a subject in school denotes the value of that to a child. So if the arts aren't present in school, or if a child goes to a music class once a week, what value do they play in that? I remember when I was growing up, people would say music class was the blow-off class because nobody cared about it. There was no value put on it. It was an elective. It was an afterthought. So the more value we place on the arts, the more we recognize, and the way that you do with STEM, we put that A in there, so it's STEAM, and we get the arts involved with science and technology and engineering and math. That gives value to it, not just for the children, but for the parents, seeing these activities and the newsletters when they go home. And we can recognize that this isn't just somebody, talking about, I love music, I want to be a singer. There is a deeper connection here to our critical thinking skills and the ways in which we learn to interact with each other. My oldest, he's 14 now, very, very shy, introverted, very talented visual artist. And I don't know how he, in middle school, just decided he wanted to audition for one of the musicals. He's never been on stage before, never performed. And he is so funny, Jed. I can't tell you, he got cast in all these leads. And I was looking at my 3 children, and I thought, you're the one I least thought would end up getting bitten by the theater bug. But you know what it did for him? It gave him confidence. He created a new whole network of friends. He was able to, I even asked him, I said, why don't you do tech crew if, you don't get in a part or something? And he said, Mom, I really love being on stage because when I'm in a costume, I can be somebody else. This is all incredible stuff for your own identity and your development. I'm sorry, but you can't get that in anything else. That's why the arts are so unique.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you've preaching to the choir here, and we want everybody else to join our choir. In the meantime, please be sure to check out Can You Dance Like a Peacock? It is a debut picture book from our guest, Dr. Rekha Rajan. Hey, Dr. Rekha, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We are so grateful that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. We'd love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on Twitter. If you are on LinkedIn, please connect with Jed Doherty. We also have a Reading with Your Kids page on LinkedIn. We would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Authors, click on the Authors Click Here button to find out how you can be a guest here on the show, and find out how we can help you celebrate your book with the world. And also, parents, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com to download our free online magazine. Hey, we want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our amazing guest. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Ann O'Leary, Soji Franklin. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.